There are people who are less talented, smart and capable than you, who have what you want. Why are they winning? Because they've mastered the one skill you've been taught to suppress: ruthless certainty. They speak without hesitation. They move like they own every room they enter. They act like the world owes them everything, and somehow it delivers. Meanwhile, you hesitate. You overthink. You wait for the perfect moment, the right words, the ideal conditions. And as you wait in the shadows of your own doubt, someone else claims what should have been yours. Here's the brutal truth. Confidence isn't a personality trait. It's a weapon of war. And if you refuse to wield it, others will use it to cut you down. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The bold ascend even when they lack the skill. The hesitant remain buried no matter how brilliant they are. Because power doesn't flow to the most deserving, it flows to the most certain. This is your turning point. This isn't about motivation. This isn't for comfort. This is about taking control of your personal power. This is about total transformation, a complete rewiring of who you are at your core. You'll learn to erase hesitation, like deleting an app, and speak with the authority of a ruler that moves through the world, like someone who commands absolute obedience. Listen closely, because your weakness ends here. It dies today, and what rises from its ashes will be unrecognizable confidence, freedom and power. You weren't born weak. Weakness was programmed into you, through repetition, through reward by punishment, and through suffocating rules. You were trained to obey, conditioned to seek approval, programmed to ask, "Is this okay?" before you breathe. You're not operating as you truly are, or who you were meant to be. You're functioning like a servant, conditioned to obey and please. Perhaps like a loyal dog that flinches at harsh words and waits for permission to exist. That voice in your head that hesitates, that overthinks, that apologizes before speaking. That's not you. That's your inner servant. And if you don't annihilate him, you will never be free. Machiavelli didn't whisper, he commanded. He didn't wait to be understood. He acted and forced the world to catch up. He didn't beg for power. He seized it with both hands because he knew a fundamental truth. Those who ask don't deserve. Your transformation begins with this sacred reprogramming. Every time your old programming tells you to shrink, you expand. Every time it whispers, "Explain yourself," you pause in deadly silence. Every time it begs you to apologize, you stare until they look away first. Because dangerous confidence doesn't come from feeling ready, it comes from doing exactly the opposite of what the servant would do. So you begin to walk faster. You claim space like it's your birthright. You stop nodding like a bobblehead and start standing tall with a commanding presence. You stop softening your edges for their comfort, and you start speaking like your words are royal decrees, not humble suggestions. Confidence isn't a mindset you adopt. It's an identity you become through defiance. Not defiance against the world, but against every pathetic version of yourself that still wants to shrink and play small. So here's the first commandment for true confidence. If it's making you small or making you a lesser version of yourself, decide to completely let it go for good. Whether it's a thought, a habit, a situation, or a person, execute it from your life without mercy. If it makes you hesitate, confront it like your life depends on it, because it does. If it makes you weak, deny it entirely. If it begs to be liked, laugh in its face and turn away. The world will preach kindness, politeness, and niceness. But here's the Machiavellian truth that will set you free. Nice men are tools. They get used, discarded, and replaced without a second thought. Powerful people aren't nice. They're precise, measured, controlled, calculated, and truly confident. And this starts by slaughtering that pathetic little voice inside you that still begs to be accepted. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You need only one thing, the willingness to become feared, not by others but by your former self. Because once you kill the inner servant, the powerful ruler awakens. Let's delve into the art of magnetic presence. Powerful people don't announce themselves. They arrive like gravity itself has shifted. Not through noise, but through presence. Not through their voice, but through their silence, their stillness, their unflinching stare. You don't need to be known. You don't need to be liked. But your presence shifts the atmosphere the moment you enter any room, because of the confidence you naturally radiate. Machiavelli witnessed this in the royal courts. The ones who ruled weren't always wearing crowns. Sometimes it was the man in the corner who barely spoke. But when he did, the entire court held its breath and leaned in like their lives depended on his next words. Silence is control. You think talking makes you dominant. It makes you predictable. The quiet man is the true threat because no one knows what's happening behind his eyes, what calculations are spinning in his mind. When you enter a room, you don't look around for permission or approval like a lost child. You observe, you absorb, you let the others scramble to prove themselves while you calculate their weaknesses, their fears, their desperate needs. Your posture speaks before your mouth opens. You move slowly, not because you're uncertain, but because you're in no hurry. Predators don't sprint unless it's time to strike. Until then, they wait with terrifying patience. Most people move like they're on fire, talking fast, interrupting, fidgeting, because they're trying to impress someone, anyone. They're still dancing for approval, like trained animals. But when you walk in like you own every room you're in, you don't speak to impress, you speak to decide. Every sentence carries the weight of finality. Every word sounds like a royal decree that cannot be appealed. People start listening differently. They don't challenge you. They calibrate themselves to you like instruments tuning to a master frequency. And when others speak, you wait. You let them go first. You let them reveal their hunger, their insecurity, their bleeding wounds, because the one who talks first usually gives away what they fear most. And once you know that, you can bend them at will. You don't chase. You summon everything towards you. Because confidence at this level isn't about being liked. It's about making others question their own position just by standing near you, just by existing in their space. So you carry yourself like the victory is already yours. Not arrogantly, but like someone who doesn't compete because he's already chosen himself as the winner. If they respect you, good. If they don't, even better. Because indifference to approval is the final form of power. And if the room wasn't yours when you entered, by the time you leave, they'll remember it like it was your kingdom, not because you demanded it, but because you silently commanded it with your presence alone. And as for how to speak, remember, words aren't just sounds, they're surgical instruments, and most men speak like they're apologizing for breathing, for existing, for taking up space in the world. You can spot them instantly. The rising tone that turns every statement into a question, the nervous laughter, the endless stream of I think, maybe, I'm not sure, but they speak like they're begging forgiveness for having an opinion. That's not speech, that's public self-sabotage. Machiavelli knew the secret. Power isn't always in what you say, but how you say it. When you speak with unshakable certainty, people don't analyze your words, they submit to the crushing weight of your conviction. Here's the truth. People aren't logical creatures, they're emotional. They don't follow truth, they follow conviction. If you sound certain, they assume you must be right. If you hesitate, they assume you're not worth their time. What does a Machiavellian voice sound like? It's slow like honey, calm like deep water, final like a judge's gavel. You speak as if your words are not open for debate, as if each sentence is a law of physics. You speak like someone who already expects to be obeyed. It doesn't matter if you're surrounded by experts. If you sound like a decision, they'll defer. Here's the second commandment of confidence. Sound like the end, the final decision, not the beginning. And here's what they'll never tell you. You don't need to speak often to command respect. In fact, the more you say, the more chances you give others to decode you, challenge you, or worse, stop fearing you. Speak less, mean more. When you do speak, eliminate all softness. No filler, no explanations, no apologies. Never say, I'm just saying. I could be wrong. I don't know if this makes sense, but those are escape hatches for the weak. Burn them all. Say what you mean and leave it hanging in the air. Let others deal with the silence that follows. Because silence after a strong statement is pure power. It dares people to challenge you, and most won't have the courage. The tone of your voice is your true message. The words are just the surface, but your tone, calm, grounded, deliberate, tells people exactly where you stand in the hierarchy of power. You raise your power by lowering your pitch, slowing down your tempo. Remove every trace of nervous energy. Sound like someone who has nothing to prove and everything under control. Sound like a man who's already made up his mind and expects the world to catch up. You don't win conversations by being louder. You win them by speaking in a way that makes people feel your words aren't suggestions. They're facts carved in stone. This is how rulers speak, how generals command armies, how kings in exile speak before they reclaim their thrones. And if someone challenges you, never defend, never explain, never justify. Just say, I disagree, or better yet, that's incorrect. Then move on like the matter is settled, because when you refuse to debate, you signal something terrifying, that your reality is not up for negotiation. That's how you control a room without ever raising your voice. Because confidence isn't volume, it's gravity. It's the invisible weight behind your words, the assumption that when you speak, others should listen like their lives depend on it. Emotional control is everything. Confidence without emotional control is just decoration. You can walk tall, speak with authority, move like a king, but if someone can still trigger you with a single sentence, you're not powerful. You're exposed, vulnerable, weak. This is where most men fail catastrophically.
They master presence, they master speech, but their emotions still belong to everyone else. A whisper of disrespect and they explode, a compliment and they melt, a moment of silence and they spiral into panic. You are not free until you win the invisible war, the one raging inside your own mind, and that begins by completely rewiring your identity from the ground up. Machiavelli understood this in the treacherous courts of power. He didn't fear enemies, he feared dependency, emotional or otherwise. He didn't trust affection, he trusted control, because once people know what moves you, they know exactly where to press. And once they know where to press, you're not dangerous anymore, you're manageable, and manageable men get discarded the moment they lose their usefulness. Here's your transformation. You stop being the man who reacts, and you become the man who calculates with surgical precision. Someone insults you, you don't explain or defend, you observe like a scientist, you extract data. What are they trying to get from you? What weakness are they hiding behind the attack? Someone praises you. You don't melt with gratitude, you analyze. Why are they complimenting you now? What do they want from you? Someone ignores you. You don't panic or chase, you become even colder, more distant. Silence becomes your weapon, not your wound. This is what it means to become psychologically unreachable, not emotionless, but unshakable. You feel everything, but you act on nothing unless it serves your ultimate outcome. When someone tests you, you don't lash out in anger. You show no visible discomfort. Why? Because your mind is not a public space. It's a fortress with walls 20 feet thick, and you decide who gets inside. Most men are so pathetically easy to control, it's almost laughable. Tell them they're not good enough, and they'll over-explain themselves to death. Tell them they're amazing, and they'll chase you like a drug. Pull away emotionally, and they'll beg to reconnect. This isn't power, this is programming, and until you break the code, you'll always be someone else's tool. How do you rewire? You kill the need to be understood. That's the root virus. The desperate desire to explain yourself, to be seen, to be validated. It's what makes you controllable. Burn it to ashes. You don't exist to be understood. You exist to move the world around you, strategically, surgically, silently. Kill the fear of rejection. The Machiavellian mind doesn't chase acceptance, it controls access. You don't want to be invited in, you want people to wonder what happens when they're no longer allowed near you, and kill the habit of reacting emotionally. Emotions are real, but irrelevant unless weaponized. You're angry, use it as fuel for action. You're insulted, use it as leverage for power. You're doubted, use it as silence that speaks louder than screams. This is how truly powerful men are forged. They don't become robotic, they become undeniable, because once no one can move you emotionally, they can only watch you move with terrifying precision and wonder what you'll do next. Rejection feels like a mortal wound to the weak. To the powerful, it's intelligence, a gift, a message from the universe saying you were too available, too obvious, too desperate. Good. Now you know exactly what needs to be destroyed. Understand this fundamental truth. Rejection is not personal, it's positional. People reject what they believe they can survive without. So if they said no to you, it means they believe they lost nothing of value. That's not an insult, that's intelligence. Now you know where they stand and where you stand, which means you can now position yourself to strike back later when they're weak and you're untouchable. Here are the exact steps. Step 1. Never appear affected. The moment you show pain, they win. It's not even about them, it's about your legend. A Machiavellian mind doesn't panic when doors slam shut. It makes the room colder. You weren't rejected, they were disqualified from accessing you. Rejection is only real when you acknowledge it, so you don't react, you evolve. Step 2. Withdraw your presence like a weapon. What happens when something you took for granted disappears? You begin to feel its weight, its true value. That's exactly what you do when rejected. Vanish completely. No explanations, no emotional farewells, no desperate attempts to change their mind, just strategic absence that cuts deeper than any argument. While they feel the void you left behind, you build yourself into something they can't ignore. Step 3. Reframe the narrative. Rejection only has power if it looks like you were chasing something. So rewrite the story, not for them, but for yourself. You weren't rejected. You selected yourself out of a game too small for your greatness. You allowed them to say no because you were observing their behavior, testing their judgment. You gave them one opportunity to prove they had the wisdom to recognize power. They failed, and in that failure, they revealed everything you needed to know. Step 4. Convert rejection into control. Here's where you win the war. Rejection is clarity. Most people live in confusion, never knowing who respects them, who uses them, who fears them. But rejection cuts through that fog like a blade. Now you know who's blind to your value. Now you know where your power has no impact yet. So what do? You refine your edge. You sharpen your image. You amplify your value so loudly that the people who once ignored you now have to explain themselves when they speak your name. Step 5. Weaponize your comeback. The goal is never revenge. Revenge is emotional. Machiavellian power is always calculated. You don't try to get back at anyone, you let time handle that for you. You reappear only when your presence creates discomfort, when your success is so visible they can't avoid it. When the person who rejected you is now watching you dominate the very space they thought you didn't belong in, you say nothing. No spite, no sarcasm, no ego, just a simple glance, or better, no glance at all, because now you're not trying to be accepted, you're setting the standard that others scramble to meet. Remember this, you weren't rejected, you were redirected toward a version of yourself that doesn't ask twice, doesn't flinch, and doesn't wait to be chosen. You've been reshaped. This is more than being inspired or motivated. You've rebuilt from your core like a weapon forged in fire. You killed self-doubt, not with positive affirmations, but with ruthless action. You didn't wait to feel ready. You moved, you acted, and you learned that power doesn't belong to the perfect. It belongs to the bold. You took rejection and turned it into rocket fuel. No more chasing approval like a starving animal. Now you let people feel the crushing cost of losing access to you. You became scarce, strategic, silent, and they noticed. The energy shifted. The dynamic changed. You stopped entering rooms to be accepted. Now you own them through presence, posture, and precision. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak as if no one can afford to disagree. And above all, you rewired your identity at the deepest level. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer easily moved or manipulated. You've become unreachable, emotionally untouchable. They can't provoke you into losing control. They can't tempt you with cheap validation. They can't shake your foundation, because you belong to no one now. And that makes you unforgettable. That's what creates a legend. Not noise, not fame, powerful silence, cold clarity, ruthless consistency. You don't need to announce your transformation. They'll feel it in your walk, in your tone, in your deliberate absence. You've become the man people observe quietly from across the room. The one who used to chase is now being chased. The one who used to ask is now deciding. The one who no longer needs approval because he became the standard everyone else measures themselves against. This wasn't just about confidence. This was about dominance, mental, emotional, psychological. You are not here to fit in. You are here to move the pieces, to bend reality to your will, to haunt their memory even in silence. Because legends don't beg, they don't explain themselves. They exist, and the world reshapes itself around them. Final commandment, you're done chasing. You're ready to become the kind of man they can't control, can't predict, and can never forget. This isn't self-help, this is war, and you just became the ultimate weapon.